At 5:12 a.m., my phone lit up the dark like a threat from a familiar number. Frostbank congratulated me for the successful funding of an $82,400 home equity line to shoreline title, with a memo that named my bungalow on Jim Hogg Avenue as the collateral. 8 minutes later, Travis County e-recording emailed a thank you for your submission with my name below a digital seal I had never touched. I lay there listening to the ceiling frantic and the soft wheeze of my daughter's white noise machine through the wall, and felt the peculiar velocity of dread. Every bill I had postponed, every will sorted next month promise, suddenly free-falling. Our house is a 1950s two-bedroom in Brentwood, the kind of Austin neighborhood where rosemary bushes grow like shrubs and everybody has a rain barrel they pretend to use. The living room runs into the kitchen like a single sentence. The back door sticks in August because humidity insists on an opinion. I built the dining table from pecan I pulled out of a demo on South First, and I still run my hand along it each morning like I'm checking for splinters in the story I told myself about the life we were building. I own a tiny wood and e-commerce business called Yard Light, half custom built-ins and half online orders for floating shelves that ship in brown boxes with my logo stamped crooked if I'm tired. My partner, Andrea, is an ICU nurse at St. David's North Austin. Her schedule is a weather pattern 3 on, 2 off, swaps, nights turning into mornings with coffee like a dare. We have one daughter, 5, who believes the dinosaur bones at the Austin Nature and Science Center are asleep and will wake if she whispers loud enough. Money is not dramatic until it gets a number and a deadline. During the worst of the summer, our 8-track died and I stood in my attic with a headlamp like a man trying to deny physics until the tech explained a compressor in words that felt like a sermon. The SBA disaster loan I took for Yard Light when lumber prices behaved like a deer has lingered like a second tenant. My dad in Temple had a TIA last fall. The co-pays and imaging aid through the emergency fund we kept like a talisman. Our daughter had a sleep study adult children's. The insurance statement read like a novella. None of this was anyone's fault, but it softened the ground under my feet so that when a new weight landed like the frost notification it didn't need running shoes. The first red flag was cedar. Andrew smelled like antiseptic and cheap scrub detergent for most of our marriage. Then one week, the scent of cedar and a sweet cologne threaded through her clothes, the kind you catch on a doctor who runs, showers at the hospital, and remembers the fancy sampler in his gym bag. She told me a respiratory therapist was trying a new deodorant and every room had caught it. The second flag wore numbers. The Camry's odometer crept up by 40 miles on night she texted about being stuck charting and I fell asleep on the couch with a glue-up clamp together. The third flag was a habit in the Eufy doorbell feed showed blackouts at 11:20 p.m. on some Thursdays. 13 minutes flat, regular enough to look like a schedule pretending to be a glitch. I would wait to your firmware update completed, and a blank strip where the night ought to live. I tapped the links from Frost and the county on my phone with the same motions I used to square a frame I trusted the muscle memory more than my head. The HELOC showed a DocuSign audit trail with an IP address matching our Spectrum router. Signature time 9:43 p.m. the night before, and my initials on borrow lines where I've memorized the loop my hand makes. Andrea had been home by then, she said, on the couch with a heating pad after a long shift because her back hurt. I pulled the router logs, saw her iPad, a messy address active until just before 10. I clicked over to the county portal and downloaded the deed of trust. My name slashed in ink I didn't lay down, a notary stamp from a title office off Mopac, and a witness signature L. Figure that matched no one I knew. The anger opacity in that moment is what I remember. I'm a man who fixes miscuts and reglues joints, not a man who speaks fluent mortgage. I forwarded everything to my business email because I needed to see my logo sitting next to the hole in my floor. Then I drove to the Frost branch on Burnett before the sun burned off the morning. The manager recognized me as the guy who brings deposits with soda speckled on his sleeves. She printed the HELOC approval packet and did not flinch at my face. She placed an immediate hold on further draws, flagged the sign as disputed, and called fraud while I sat in a chair that seemed designed to remind everyone of other people's mistakes. She scribbled me a case number FR-118-77 egg and offered water in the voice of someone trained to talk men down from roofs. Andrew texted from Miku, slammed with the lilt of a person who knows the right words to get sympathy in space. I pictured her writing with gloved hands and rolled the thought back like a bad cut. I packed our daughter's lunch with the muscle memory of a year of morning strawberries, cheese cubes, the dinosaur napkin she claims is lucky, and walked her to Brentwood Park Daycare under crepe myrtles dropping pink like confetti. At the door, MS. Leila handed me a permission slip for Water Day and a newsletter about the spring fundraiser. Normal, 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 the brain chanted. Back home, the house made its morning noises, the ice maker groaning, the HEB bags rustling under the sink, and I remembered the key on Andrea's ring that hadn't been there 2 months ago. Flat black, narrow, the kind that opened storage units or gym lockers. I used to think snooping was choosing to be a person I wouldn't respect. That was a younger man's opinion. The joint credit card ledger had a recurring $36.99 monthly charge to Store Box in Lamar. I drove. The clerk had a clipboard smile and a policy he pretended to love. He asked for ID. I handed him mine. He said I wasn't on the unit but confirmed the last payment hit yesterday and asked if I wanted to add myself as an alternate. He slid the screen aside to take a quick check of a calendar, and in the reflection of the glass I saw unit number 114 and a name typed slightly wrong, Andrea's maiden name missing the last vowel. The pistol I keep in my glove box is a poor man's locksmith who has helped me rescue a dozen clients from gashed hardware. Unit 114 coughed open like it had been waiting. Inside, a plastic dresser labelled in Sharpie with ordinary Les winter clothes, toiletries, bedding. A pelican case on the floor open to reveal a second phone still shrink-wrapped. A ring box from a shop on South Congress holding a band that would fit Andrea's hand if I closed my eyes and guessed. And a lease packet for an apartment at the Pearl on Burnett signed by Andrea and a co-tenant, Alviga. The move-in had been last month. The rent was $21.90, an amount that sat in my stomach like a fish hook. There was also a stack of Alta receipts for the good shampoo and a bag of dog treats for a brand we did not buy because we did not have a dog. If the HELOC was someone carving my name into stone, the storage unit was the handwriting on the bathroom mirror. I put everything back where I found it because I needed a brain to stack facts and not just feelings. And I drove to St. David's to find an HR office that isn't designed for men like me. The woman at the desk used 2 keystrokes and an empathy I didn't deserve. She confirmed nothing without a subpoena and asked me to understand. I said I was documenting a schedule mismatch. She gave me a paper with a fax number, and that was her kindness. That night, Andrea told me, hand on the island, that the doctor in the unit had been through a divorce I already knew about and that she had signed on a temporary lease to help him keep his toddler Mondays without breaking his housing requirement until the final hearing. She said the HELOC was so we could finally fix the siding and get a deck, that we had talked about it, that she had signed for me because she was home and I was at the shop. She laid apology over practicality. If I had not seen the notary stamp time, if I had not seen the audit trail line up with the Eufy blackout, I might have believed her. The mind wants the story that lets it keep sleeping. Public humiliation between people who still need to swap weeks on a calendar is not a sport I enjoy. But I picked a weekend where my sister's barbecue stretched across a yard in Pflugeville and decided to let the daylight do some work. I brought a manila folder and placed it next to a bowl of HEB potato salad like it belonged there. When stories started moving around the picnic table, I waited until football voices dipped and then I laid out the frost case letter, the county deed with the forged signature circled, a printout of the store box charge history, a photo of the lease header for the Pearl, and a screenshot of the Eufy's firmware updates lined up against the breaker panel's Wisecam timestamps. I did not say the doctor's name. I did not have to. Somebody's cousin recognized the initials and said them out loud like a TV character. My mother stared at my daughter and then at my face like she was deciding which of us required protection. Andrea set her mouth in a straight line and called me dramatic without using words. She told my family I had always been suspicious and miserly, that the HELOC was to float my failing business, that I was making a private sacrifice into a public spectacle. She did not cry. She poured iced tea and offered dessert and told my sister she'd send the brisket recipe. Social pressure slid around the table like a thing with bad breaks. If I had been wrong, the next week would have shown it. Instead, the drumbeat began. Reveal 1. The title company's notary log. When my lawyer asked for it, showed a borrower signing E. Miller next to a Texas driver's license number that dropped the last digit of mine and a witness signature in a hand that matched Alviga from the lease packet. The notary's timestamp, 9:48 p.m., sat like a nut against my Eufy blackout at 9:57 p.m. My lawyer wrote words the notary responded to. I have never loved letterhead until that day. Reveal 2. Del Children's emailed a school form about emergency contacts. Andrea had added a Dr. Alviga, family friend, to our daughter's pickup list. Miss Leela at Daycare is not a woman you slide paper past. She printed the form and circled the edition in pink gel pen and handed it to me at pickup with the firm quiet of someone who has seen 1,000 variations on this chapter. I went home and typed a letter locking the list with a code word and a directive. No additions without both signatures. I signed my full name. I scanned it to my lawyer and the principal. I printed a copy and taped it inside our pantry door because I like paper where food lives. Reveal 3. The Camis told typing 183 at 11:39 p.m. to Cedar Park on a night Andrea St. David's app said she had been scheduled for knock. The next morning there was a receipt on our counter from a 24-hour HEB pharmacy for a prescription I did not recognize, with a patient name redacted by a careless marker that bled around the edges until LV appeared out. The medication was a common antibiotic and not a scandal. The name was the point. Reveal 4. A married charge at the domain for Thursday night. Physician rate plus a duplicate $17 parking bill to our joint card and a second card number I only learned because the front desk printed a folio that listed 2 names. When I froze our joint Amex that afternoon, an email popped into my inbox congratulating the new co-user on activation of Miller Vega Family on Apple Card. I didn't know family could look like a credit limit until it sat next to my name. The independent witness who made everything click into 3 dimensions was not a friend or a coworker. It was my neighbor, Mr. Hammond, a retired AP physics teacher with a front porch big enough for memories and a habit of sitting under a fan as if watching the neighborhood were a formal job. He collects cameras like some men collect coins. He showed me an 11:27 p.m. clip from his Eufy floodlight 2 houses down, someone approaching our side yard breaker box, lifting the cover, flicking the small switch I labelled the doorbell XFRMR back when I still put cheerful excess in my notes, and shoulder tapping a man in script as the 2 of them slipped through our back gate. He told me a story about instrumentation and error, about how recording devices don't lie but men do, and he used none of those words because he is gentle. He handed me a thumb drive because he trusts thumb drives more than the cloud, and he knows men like me need something we can feel in our hands. There is a branch in the path between righteous and careful. The bank fraud investigator, a man with kind eyes and the patience of a lamppost, told me to file a police report because the HELOC signature would need a case number bigger than a banker's file. The Travis County clerk said the same. The St. David's HR said they'd cooperate with the subpoena. My lawyer drew up a petition for legal separation with temporary orders, temporary conservatorship of our daughter, a standard possession schedule modified for an ICU nurse and a woodworker who doesn't keep bankers' hours, a TRO against incurring new joint debt, and a specific order prohibiting additions to school or medical contacts without both signatures. He added a request to void the HELOC as forged and to instruct Shoreline Title to unwind funds contingent on Frost's fraud ruling. He told me to initial each page like I was building a staircase, 1 tread at a time or you fall. I filed a police report at DPD North Substation with the flat voice of someone reciting a recipe they do not like. The officer wrote forgery financial instrument, assigned me a case number APD-25-309,422 and explained that financial crimes travel lines that cross desks slowly. He was not unkind. He did not promise. He told me to keep every scrap. Andrea continued with the stories. She said the lease was a favour. The HELOC was my idea. The Daycare contact was a harmless precaution. The Marriott was a work conference for nurses. The Camry toll to Cedar Park was a wrong turn. She said she was the one saving us, offering to float the HVAC, to fix the siding, to use her good credit to keep us alive. Gaslighting is a word people misuse. Here, it felt medically accurate. She told me I would apologize when as-built drawings of our life matched the plans she waved at me. I printed our life and stacked it on the table and allowed my silence to add weight. The public scene the court created became our new weekly ceremony. The judge in Travis County, who looked like she had been exhausted by 1,000 versions of our case and would still be careful with the one in front of her, issued temporary orders. Exchanges at the picnic tables by Mueller Lake Park because kids do better when they can look at ducks. No new debts on anything joined. No additions to school or medical contacts. No overnights with non-family in the presence of our daughter. No entering the other's residence without consent. A freeze on the HELOC pending the bank's process, and an order instructing notary and title to preserve their logs. She signed in blue ink, the only ink I respect right now, and wrote a case number on the top D-1FM-2025-781 that felt like offense. Our daughter understood none of this in adult words, and all of it in the way light changes. She asked why we now met Mommy by the big metal spider by the thinkery. I told her the park was fun and water was nice. She asked whether ducks sleep. I told her yes. She drew a picture of our house and a little rectangle beside it with a squiggle she labelled beep and a small box on the side of the house with a lock I had added the day after I saw the breaker flick. She put a blue dot where she believed the tiny camera lived. Children are better witnesses than anyone deserves. Then came the health twist I resent even now for what it made me think. Our daughter had a little fever with a rash that Daycare cared about more than we did. Dale Children's Urgent Care did a quick panel and a regular blood draw. A nurse handed us a printout with a blood type that did not match what Andrea had told me hers was years ago, and a senior nurse casually mentioned that 2 O-negative parents do not usually produce an AB child. I am not O-negative, I am a plus. Andrea claims A. The math was muddy, my head felt like a math problem. I googled until my brain made errors. I printed a genetic inheritance chart and hated myself. For half a day, I considered whether I would demand a DNA test in writing or wait until our daughter was older or ask her pediatrician to explain blood type to me like I was 10. Then I watched her sleep hugging her stuffed bat and realized the swab would not make breakfast easier. I wrote a letter anyway, not to Andrea, but to my lawyer requesting that if fraternity ever became a legal point, testing would be done privately and then filed under seal to keep adults from turning a child's biology into a weapon. Would you demand the test now because the nurse said something offhand? Or would you wait until the court forced you, even if waiting made your spine feel like wet rope? The trickle of paperwork turned into a tone I lived by. Frost returned a preliminary fraud finding in my favour and froze the HELOC disbursement beyond the initial funding. Shoreline Title sent a bland note about awaiting instruction. Travis County set the forged deed hearing 6 weeks out. Sent. David responded to a subpoena with Andrea's clock in and clock out logs, which made a neat diagonal list most weeks and left blank caps on the nights our Eufy blinked black. The Pearl's management, in response to a formal demand, sent the lease with both signatures and a photocopy of an ID belonging to our Vega Hospital ID badge, wrist tattoo peeking under a cuff, a smile loaned for credential photos. Our babysitter, Maya, 19 and studying at the CC, became the independent witness I never expected. One Thursday when Andrea picked up our daughter for her Mueller dinner visit, Maya tidied the kitchen at my request and texted me at 11:32 p.m. to say she had heard the side gate and seen the small flashlight beam we have both learned to recognize. She had the presence of mind to hold her phone up to the window and capture a short clip of 2 silhouettes by the breaker. One bending to the lock I had added and trying it like a man who believes rules will defer to him. They left when the camera's red dot winked on. Maya texted me that I should buy better locks and that she loved our kids' drawing of the beep and that she was charging me the normal rate even though this mess was not normal. I moved money like a man bailing a boat that still floats. I opened a checking in my name at Ofku ending in 4,000. 129 unrouted yard light deposits there. I set the joint cards to allow only fuel and groceries with hard caps and enrolled in fraud alerts that pinged my phone like a nervous habit. I wrote a certified letter to the pediatric clinic locking all contact changes behind both signatures. I selected a code word for daycare that means nothing to us, a street name I dislike, and I practiced saying it out loud so I didn't stumble if someone at the desk ever asked and my mouth forgot my brain. I pulled our credit reports and found one inquiry from CBNA Retail that I didn't authorize. I froze my file on all 3 bureaus and taped the PINs inside a kitchen cabinet where I keep the spare batteries because future me will remember batteries in a crisis faster than he will remember that I had put the PINs under the cutlery. Andrea texted less and harder. She told me I was poisoning our daughter's childhood. She said I was turning an act of generosity into a crime. She told friends we were separating because I had jealousy in my bones. She posted a photo at the domain of a cocktail shaped like a chemistry experiment and tagged no one and everyone. People love a story with a villain whose face they can draw without seeing the paperwork. I stocked the fridge with strawberries because our daughter equates strawberries with the household that makes sense. The court review date inched closer, and with the loneliness I did not anticipate. Mueller Lake Park heard more adult voices than it should. Parents in puffer vests walked by with toddlers strapped to their fronts, light proof they had followed instructions. Andrea and I stood 6 feet apart and traded a backpack and a painted rock and a tie of childlike clerks in a store someone forgot to close. Sometimes Andrea's face softened when she looked at our kid. Sometimes mine did. The man with the wrist tattoo never came to exchanges. Perhaps he knows that some lines remain lines even when you practice drawing through them in private. The day the notary from Shoreline Title took the stand at the forged deed hearing, he testified about his book without looking at me. His logo lacked the last digit of my license, and his description of the signer's height and head did not match me. He had signed hundreds of forms and looked appropriately ashamed about not remembering this one. The judge kept her voice level and instructed counsel to prepare an order voiding the deed as to me pending the bank's final fraud finding. I should have felt victorious. I felt like a table that had never sat level even when the floor was perfectly true. Afterward, I stood in my shop with pecan dust settling in a cone of light from the roll-up and tried not to cry like a teenage boy after a lost game. My phone vibrated at 5:12 a.m. again the next day like a man with a terrible sense of humor and an excellent sense of timing. The bank app pinged, not with a fraud, but with a deposit $74.66 from a client paying the balance in 2 petty installments because that is what people do. The ceiling fan ticked. Outside, a mockingbird sang a riff that might have been a ringtone sometime in 2008. I could hear my daughter breathing down the hall, her little sleep noises keeping a rhythm that felt like a metronome I could live by. I made coffee. I labelled a bag of screws because order is a kind of prayer. I walked to the panel and touched the padlock, the cheap kind that can be cut with a bolt cutter that lives in the trunk of half the men in my neighbourhood, and told myself that intent matters too. Would you tell Daycare the whole story and watch the staff practice neutral faces, or would you keep the cupboard in your receipts and let paper talk in rooms where wood cannot? Would you send a letter to the hospital, see your name in the doctor and the nurse and the dates, knowing the HR corrective action would be entirely private and you would never be allowed to feel the catharsis? Or would you sit on your hands and trust that a court and a bank and a daycare and a neighbour with a thumb drive form enough of a fence to keep one child's days round? My daughter still asks if the dinosaur bones are sleeping. I tell her yes because some truths need time for adulthood to arrive. She still watches for ducks at Mueller and names them after classmates like a mayor who hasn't learned the burdens of office. Andrea still wears a cedar sometimes when she forgets to launder her scrubs elsewhere. The man with the wrist too lightly still believes that a doorbell can be made blind by a breaker if your hands are quick. The judge still signs in blue on a desk I am not allowed to touch. I still ship shelves with my logo stamped slightly crooked when I am tired. The table we eat has still holes in its pecan grain, the story of a tree and a flood and men with saws who thought they were just doing a job. At 5:12 a.m. When the phone lights now, I wake into a quiet I can understand. Sometimes it is the bank's fraud bot practicing its scales, with another we blocked a purchase you didn't make. Sometimes it is an ordinary automatic deposit. Sometimes it is nothing at all and I lie there listening to the fan tick and thinking about the way paper can ruin and save a life with equal indifference. I get up and pad through the house that still belongs to me, past the Eufy's blue ring reflecting on the glass to the kitchen where the coffee jar sits like a fact. The birds outside argue about very little and everything at once. I pour, and the sound is the same today as it was the morning the bank congratulated me for sinking my house. The difference is the folder on the counter with our case number clipped to the front, the Daycare codeword inside, and every breaker in the box labelled in my block hand, the small upstream acts of a man who insists on lights staying on.